All right, mates, welcome back. JL Scott Fishing. Hope everybody's doing well. We're going to talk road to Chickamauga for KFL. KFL coming down the wire to the end to the championship coming up on Lake Chickamauga for the second year for the Kayak Fishing League. If you've been following it this season, it has been a up and down, controversial as well as exciting season. To say the least. I'll do a recap video coming up after, probably before the championship. It just kind of like goes through all the stuff throughout the season from an outside third-party fan perspective. And that opportunity. I know that if you do a YouTube or you do a Google search on the KFL, you're probably going to see this ugly schmuck pop up. I think I've probably been outside the league, probably one of the only people, maybe Bass Trail, that's even covered KFL this year. And for that, hey, look, I call balls and strikes, mates. I'm not bought and paid for by anybody. I don't work for Motion Sports Network. I'm not paid and compensated by the KFL by any means. And so, on this platform, you get balls and strikes, okay? And that's just how I call it, and that's what I think now that we've gotten up to like 12,000 subscribers this year here on YouTube, people appreciate a third-party perspective that's not from the inside, that's not a shill, it's not a, being an apologist. I'm not an apologist. I call balls and strikes. I call myself out if I'm wrong about something. As well as, when things don't smell right, and there are a lot of things this year in the KFL that did not smell right, okay, from any person's perspective on the outside. Now, if you're on the inside and you're pulling the strings behind the curtain, maybe it makes sense to you, but, that's the way it is in all sports that, and stuff like that on this kind of level. That doesn't really have the ear of real media. I'm not real media, okay? I'm a schmuck on YouTube. And so my head is not some people would, project it to be when they don't like what I say. But again, if real media, like professional sports was kind of on this, it would be a lot worse for the KFL this year. Okay, just based on, the things that have happened. But we've gotten down to the last divisional rounds before the semifinals. And surprises? I don't really know if there's really any. I think you could say the Virginia Reapers would probably be a surprise in the South. Just because I don't think very many people, brand new, team. I don't think very many people really knew too much about them, and that in itself is a commentary on the KFL. Okay, whether they want to admit it or not. The fact that you have a team that's in the semifinals that most people don't, even people within the league, don't really know that much about. Right? Okay, well, that falls on the league. To promote all of its teams, not just certain teams, and not just the teams that are associated with the people that come on the live streams, or Hindsight, or KFL Live, or whatever every week, right? They talk about those guys' teams all the time because they're there, right? That's something the KFL needs to think about, because you got a team here that most people don't know much about at all, from Virginia. And that's my neck of the woods. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really know, too much about those guys, and that's a shame, I think, from that perspective. I kind of know where they fish. I kind of know one or two from Facebook. In that regard, I really think that this team probably should have been elevated to a lot more coverage, and stuff, But you kind of see that kind of disparity of coverage, and it does exist, whether they want to admit it or not. And again, they don't have that much time. You focus on the events drive coverage. Totally get that. You can't really control what's going to happen on any given water, any part of the country. The news is going to drive from where the news generates. And Kuza obviously has been, the top. I look at these Final Four teams here for the KFL, and those Final Four teams are in the South: Kuza Kingfishers and Virginia Reapers. Okay, Kuza Kingfishers ranked at the top of power rankings, my power rankings, virtually 99% of the season. Okay, boom. All right, not a surprise. Not a surprise. Okay, in the North, you've got the Indianapolis Knights, okay, and the Massachusetts Maulers. Now, you would think that the Knights would be the surprise, right, in that regard, but very consistent all season long, okay? Was in the top 10 for the power rankings for most of the season. So that one, 6-2, 4-2 in their division. I think they, they did lose to Tennessee, I think, in one of those matchups, which we'll talk about that in a second. The Maulers, 5-3 and 4-3. And they're going to go to the semifinals with the potential to go to the championship, again, for the second year in a row. That might be more, I know a lot of people, that team is stacked. And I know a lot of people were, blindsided by that a little bit over the weekend, at least in the messages that I got. It doesn't surprise me because I didn't buy into the whole thing they were dead and buried after week 5. That was being portrayed on hindsight. They did the same thing happened to see, here's the thing about the league is you kind of have guys that are dedicated to the KFL only, right? You've never heard of them before until KFL, and they fish KFL, and maybe they fish their local, right? But, and then you have absolute hammers and sticks that you are well familiar with, right? In the kayak community that are fishing Hobie, fishing KBF, fishing Bassmasters, right? You've got so it did not surprise me based on the schedule alignments for KBF, Bassmaster Kayak Series, and Hobie to see teams like the Lone Star Bandits, teams like the Massachusetts Maulers, who were incredibly successful the first year of the league, drop some losses in the beginning of the season. I wasn't shocked by that, and I wasn't going to put them dead and buried. I honestly believe that if the Lone Star Bandits had not been banned from the KFL, they would have made the playoffs. Because all of their guys were back. We just saw Jeff from the KFL get Angler of the Year down in Texas, right? Okay? We've seen guys on that squad win events and all these different things outside of the KFL, okay? But in the beginning of the season, you don't always have your best 4, okay, on your body of water because of conflicts. We just saw that, mates, this weekend, okay? And it's something, look, again, KFL can do whatever they want, but in terms of the product, if the product is supposed to be, the product and everyone's supposed to follow all of these things, you just had a team only send 3 players to compete in the divisional round, okay? And so a lot of that has to do with logistics. And when you only create 2 conferences, okay, or within that, you set that up potentially to happen. The Warhawks had to go all the way to Arkansas, 16 hours. They took 5 guys, had to go all the way to Arkansas, 16 hours, right, to fish an event, okay? Loser go home. Loser get no money, okay? You lose, you're out, right? And then Arkansas wins that match and then has to come all the way back and drive all the way back to Virginia, okay, for 16, 17 hours to face the Virginia Reapers on their home water, and they only send 3 anglers in a divisional round game. That's not a good look for the KFL, okay? And here's the thing about it that I'm going to speak as a voice for people that aren't going to step up and speak their mind about it from within the league, okay? The Arkansas Hogs are a team that's been surrounded by controversy this entire season, okay? Whether or not KFL wants to admit it or not, or whether they prefer to keep it pushed under the rug, it's completely their business, okay? But they had issues going on throughout the season. Okay? We'll cover that later on. All right? And in Arkansas Hogs' ties to what happened to the Lone Star Bandits. That's a whole nother video that will be covered in depth. Okay? But then at the end of the season, they were allowed to pick up an absolute national hammer added to their team to compete on Dardanelle, to win that match, to get them, okay, in the match against the Warhawks, right? Okay, to defeat the Warhawks. Think about that. Where was that hammer on Saturday? Was he one and done? Like, they picked a guy up, fished one event, they won. Then the next event, the guy they picked up doesn't even fish it. In fact, the two hammers from Dardanelle, who finished in the top 10, I think, didn't make the trip to Virginia to face the Virginia Reapers. So you're like, you know, it kind of begs, like, okay, you just picked it. There has to be something where the KFL says, okay, if you pick a guy up after the season, he has to participate in a minimum of at least two, right? You can't just let somebody bring in a guy for one event, let them win that event, and then move on to the next round. That's not a good look for the league, okay? And the other bad look for the league is the reason why that situation even happens is you have an owner in Arkansas that can't fish for his own team, which is why they had to go out and get that hammer after an injury was sustained to the team, to one of the teammates, to get their team to 8. Remember, you only have to play 4, so you don't really need 8, okay? Now, the owner could not slide into that spot, and I'm sure the owner would have traveled to Virginia. It's his team, right? He would have fished that event. Why wouldn't he? If he only had 3 anglers? But the owner couldn't, right? Because the owner couldn't add himself. They couldn't add himself to that roster because the owner of the Arkansas Hogs was on the Natural State Eagles roster in Arkansas, which makes absolutely no sense to anybody outside of the league that you talk to. Anybody, okay? That makes any sense. That you can have an owner of one team be on the roster and fish for another team. And that's why he could not just slide himself on his own team's roster, okay? Because it's after the deadline, and no one was going to approve that, right? Like, wait, we can't, that'd be toxic, right? Okay? People like me would be all like, right? Okay? But that's what when you don't have defined rules and defined parameters of which, and you're going to abide by them for everybody, this is what it creates. It creates a way, well, good for the Reapers. I think the Reapers would have won anyway. Even if those hammers one of those hammers went to Virginia, I think the Reapers would have won anyway. I just do. They know that water like nobody's business. Okay, they put up 165.5 in September on that body of water. Okay, you know, they're every bit as good on those bodies of water in Virginia, in my opinion, in terms of knowledge, in terms of does not matter. They have their fish. They know where their fish are, as Coosa is on Neely. In my opinion, not biased, I'm a homer from Virginia. Coosa's got that same benefit now, okay? Because now the Reapers got to go to Coosa. Coosa put up 187.5 on the Slayers, and the Slayers put up 162. The Slayers had a great season. You know, and I think that the Slayers actually had the highest differential, that's points for versus points against, of any team in the league this year. I think it was like 268 or something. It's ridiculous. So, you know, that match, again, and the Granite State this season, and Indianapolis Knights. If you look at the KFL, you're thinking about joining. I got a video already done. I have not loaded up on YouTube. I'm going to wait for the playoffs to end on owners in the KFL. Like, if you want to be an owner in the KFL, like, just from an owner's perspective of how that all would go down if you wanted to create a team, how you would create a team based on the last 2 years. For example, you want to win all 4 of your home games, right? It's not rocket science. If you win all 4 of your home games, there's a 90% chance you're going to make the playoffs in this league. Indianapolis Knights is undefeated at home. okay, for 2 years now. They just beat Pennsylvania Bronzebacks 172-25 to 157-25. Great year for Pennsylvania Bronzebacks. Bounce back year after last year. Those guys are literally, I think, one local hammer away. I say this because I believe if the Pennsylvania Bronzebacks were to add someone like a local hammer, like a Jake Harshman, and I don't know if Jake probably wouldn't fish in the KFL because he's very committed to Hobie and very committed to other things. But I mean, if a local guy who knows the Susquehanna, knows Pennsylvania waters, that team next year, look out. Because again, they did lose one home match, I think, this year. But they're stacked. They're loaded. Nate Hall, Nick Audi, Ryan and Frank, they're loaded, okay? So they keep an eye on them for next year. They're just I think they're one hammer away, one local hammer away, okay? A guy that they know they can depend on for every home event. Because you win all those home games, you've seen it. Granite State won all their home games, right? And so Granite State lost on Saturday, okay? Now, you guys know I follow the channel all year long. I picked Granite State to win the damn thing, okay? So I was disappointed in that. But I got to tell you, I wasn't disappointed in their performance. I mean, they put up 162 inches. They're up against a Mauler squad who is a team, okay? And there's not a lot. I mean, when you look at things on balance, they're all teams in the KFL, okay? But there are teams that are teams, okay, that are basically working like a well-oiled machine, okay? They fish together for a long time. They know each other's strengths and weaknesses. They know exactly who's going to do well on what body of water, weather conditions, what's happening, okay? That dynamic for them is just foundational to their success. And so I don't buy into the argument, Granite State succumbed to the pressure. I don't think there was come on, guys. Seriously, stop trying to invent and fabricate realities, okay, for clickbait, okay? Those guys are absolute hammers. I don't think that Granite State was under any pressure because they had home field, okay? I mean, was Arkansas under any pressure on Dardanelle? Come on. I just don't buy into all that stuff. I think that's all fabricated nonsense. I think you have guys, and it's all about the guys you have finding fish. Both teams clearly found fish, okay? And then it just becomes a slugfest, which is awesome. So congrats to the Maulers, okay? They've been in this game for a while, right? Okay, heads down, freaking fish, right? But now the Maulers have to go to Indianapolis. Indianapolis has never lost at home. So is Indianapolis under any pressure? Or are the Maulers have the pressure, right? I mean, you can say whatever you want. These guys travel all over the country for sure. Most of these guys on the Maulers and a few guys on Indianapolis, I know Sam, I think, and Mike fish a lot of national events, at least KBF anyway. And then I think Mike Elsey does some other things. But, they've got to travel and all that. And those guys are all used to traveling. So, I mean, there's not going to be that issue. I mean, it's going to come down to, finding fish. Inevitably, that's where these matches are determined, is the teams that are successful working together as a team, locating fish. It's what you learn that every weekend. You hear things from people and you're like, well, how did you win? What was your success? Well, all that stuff. It all comes down to that communication is finding the fish, either pre-fishing or on the actual day of the event. And the Maulers are outstanding at that, okay? They're outstanding at locating both shallow and deep water fish, period, okay? They just are. Now, those guys are also, whether you like it or not, I'm not a fan, but it does not matter what I think. They're also, live scope and side imaging freaking nuts, okay? Masters of that, okay? And that could be why they are where they are. And that could be a lesson to other teams. Look, you got to at least have a guy on your team with live scope to find fish, right? I don't know. I'm not a big live scope guy. I'm not a big guy staring at a screen guy. I like to read rivers. That's how I like to fish. But I'm not in these events. I'm not. I have no idea. But it's working for them. I mean, there's the proof's in the pudding. And so, and a lot of other hammers have them too. So I mean, it's out there. The proof is out there. In terms of aiding in the location of fish. Ain't going to catch your fish. Okay, live scope's not going to catch your fish for you. Okay, but it's definitely aiding in locating fish. Okay, for these anglers. Okay, but then still you got to catch them. So you got to give everybody props for that. And so that's where you're looking at now going into the final four to go to the championship at Lake Chickamauga, which is going to be interesting. Conventional wisdom would tell you that Kuza is going to win and Indianapolis Knights are going to win. Why? Because they win on home water, right? That's the conventional wisdom is, okay, history tells us Indianapolis Knights are tough as nails at home. Kuza just flat out knows where the fish are at home. They've had close matches, for sure, okay? But still, they always seem to find fish. And so, if you're betting, and I know there are people betting in the KFL, let's be honest. Conventional wisdom would have those two teams favored. Now, if you factor in a lot of the other stuff, people who know stuff, people who have relationships, blah, blah, all that other stuff, whatever, there are going to be people who are going to have the Maulers favored over the Knights. I don't think anyone's going to have the Reapers favored over Kuza, which is absolutely perfect for those guys, okay? Because they've been under the radar all year long, and leave it up to them to pull the upset of the year, okay? Because they have the ability to do that. Like, they do. It really all depends on what's going on with this weather system, how that's going to impact the matches, okay? I have no idea. I haven't checked Hurricane Ian and what I'm sure it's going to be dropping rain at a bunch of places in the next 48 hours. So that's going to factor into a lot of stuff. I mean, that could tilt things up a little bit. But I don't think very many people are gonna tell you to put a bet down on the Virginia Reapers, except for the Virginia Reapers, who are very confident anglers. So most of that money's going to go on Kuza, and and probably 60% probably will go on Indianapolis, and 40% there are people who are going to hedge at and think, because the Maulers have been there before. They've done it on the road. I think they beat Motor City on the road. They beat Pennsylvania on the road. They just beat Granite State on the road. That one stung a little bit for me because I didn't really understand. Like, they canceled, I think, or postponed, but they didn't fish on Winnipesaukee, and that was disappointing to me. Because like Kuza is not going to move off of Neely, right? They're not going to be like play some kind of defensive thing. They know they're confident on that, and I thought Granite State was confident on Winnipesaukee. Like, you know that body of water so well. Just stack it up, let the dice roll, and have a go. Don't get cute, right? But I don't know what the situation was that precipitated the move, whether it was something on the lake, an event on the lake, whatever. I know it was postponed today. I hadn't followed it that closely to know what the logic was for that. I would have liked to have seen those teams on Winnipesaukee myself. That's just where I am. So that's your 4 teams left. Indianapolis Knights at home against the Maulers. Reapers on the road against Kuza to determine who is hitting the road to Chickamauga for the KFL championship. All right, mates.